Hello, I'm John Furrier, host of theCUBE. We're here at our New York Stock Exchange CUBE studio for the NYSE Wired program and community, of course. theCUBE is bringing all the action here on the show floor, connecting Wall Street and Silicon Valley. We've got our Palo Alto studio. Of course, we cover all the events, and one event we were just recently at was Chainguard Assemble. We have their co-founder and CEO, Dan, is here. Dan, great to see you. Congratulations on the fresh financing, October 23rd
Yeah,
last
thanks.
week. Congratulations.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Yeah, love the venue you're at there. Wish I could be there in person.
The trades are going on behind me. We're featuring the cyber leaders, zero trust environment. You guys have been really the platform, certainly validated by this next round of funding that you secured. The trust and open source, security, you guys are doing it all. Take us through the news real quick. The round, was it expected? What's the use of funds going to be used for? What's the plans?
Yeah, sure. So we just announced a $280 million funding from General Catalyst, and it's actually a pretty interesting vehicle. This is not a traditional, venture funding round. This is a different vehicle General Catalyst has set up over the last couple of years called their Customer Value Fund. And it's non-dilutive capital, so it's not like a normal equity round where you price the company and stuff like that. This is a flexible vehicle that allows us to invest in sales and marketing. So it pairs really well with the other financing we did earlier this year. You asked if this was planned. Yeah, we've been kind of working on this one in parallel since we did that Series D round. But it's a really dynamic vehicle. It can scale up and down, and it lets us invest in our growth. That's, getting customers is what we're spending a lot of time and money on right now as we hit this point in our scaling journey.
Nice escape velocity strategy as you guys kind of go supernova. I want to ask you about, we've been following your business, great developers traction, the velocity you guys enable. KubeCon's coming up November 10th. theCUBE will be there, you're there, that's your community, but the AI world is kicking into high gear, so the cloud native is on a full, I won't say collision course, but certainly the enablement of those two worlds are coming together, having the velocity, the trust, and all these use cases. We're seeing people saying, hey, I cloned Salesforce in a weekend. You got to wire that together, and so there's a lot of work on containers, security. Can you share your view of the current state that you guys are executing into with this AI agentic infrastructure emerging, essentially kind of an extension of what you've been living and we've been covering,
Yeah.
microservices, Kubernetes. That's the foundational layer, but take us through your point of view on this.
Yeah, AI is like it's like hitting the gas or turning everything up to 11 in open source and software development and all this stuff put together. These models are trained on open source code. They're great at writing code the same way people have been writing code before, just doing it a lot faster. And you talk about us hitting escape velocity. It's also escape velocity for Kubernetes. That's the platform powering almost everyone's AI infrastructure. From the big ones out there like OpenAI and Anthropic down to everybody setting up their own inference platforms and training platforms and all these data lakes. That's all flowing through Kubernetes. That's all flowing through these cloud native architectures. Collision course probably isn't the right word, but yeah,
Yeah.
it's a critical piece of the
Accelerated
infrastructure.
connection
Yeah,
coming
yeah.
together.
Yeah, it's another 10 years of Kubernetes, I think, is what this has guaranteed the world.
Yeah.
Yeah, KubeCon's the place to be for discussing all of that.
You guys had great success and continue to thunder away on bridging the tooling and the platforms to the enterprise needs with this now accelerated, convergence of AI and cloud native. There's a real focus on the enterprise side of things. What do you
Yeah.
see there? Because this is where it's still the same game. Developers, I was just
Yep.
talking with NVIDIA in GTC last week, they're going full in on ecosystem around developers, trying to bring that AI factory, to the edge and then to the enterprise. But you got to run software on these things. It's programmable, it's an infrastructure, so it's kind of like, it feels like IaaS meets PaaS on the cloud, but it look a little bit different horizontal scale. What's your thoughts on the developer angle and how do we bridge this?
Yeah. Yeah, KubeCon's a really interesting place for this. Like you talked about, what was the first KubeCon you were at?
First one ever. I've been at all
First one
KubeCons.
ever, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was at a couple of those first ones, and it was small back then. Enterprises were talking about Kubernetes and containerization and public cloud and all this stuff for years, but probably 3 years ago was when it really happened. AI is like that, except that compression cycle is, it's like 6 months now instead of this 6 year kind of warm
Yeah.
up phase we all had before. So yeah, that's kind of the place we serve. How do we bring these technologies safely into the enterprise? And everyone's trying to do it all this quarter and next quarter instead of planning these things over 4 or 5 years like it's happened in the past.
When I talked to Justin Kirkland before he joined your company, he was telling me how excited he was to join Chainguard, and for certainly it's got a good vote from him. But the topic at that time was, containers were there, Kubernetes was developing, SBOMs were the big conversation, software bill of materials. Now as we get into kind of software being written maybe by agents, does that change the nature of pipelining, containers? You guys are continuing that velocity. What's your view on that, and how should people be thinking about setting up and provisioning for essentially an autonomous programming
Yeah.
layer?
Yeah, it's everything faster and more of it, is the easiest way to think about it. I was at a dinner in Dallas a couple weeks ago with a bunch of Fortune 100 CIOs. Just had lunch today with some building developer platforms at one of the big five banks in the U.S. And everybody's trying to grapple with the same things, right? Everyone knows anecdotally, and if you sit over the shoulder of someone working with these tools and these models, you're now writing code 10 times faster or 10 times as much code in the same amount of time. And everyone's sitting and asking the same question too of, well, why aren't my projects getting done 10 times faster? And I think what we've seen happen here is developers were never actually the bottleneck in software development, or writing code was never actually the bottleneck. All of the systems downstream from that were even before. But so now we've taken this one piece that wasn't the bottleneck, made it 10 times faster, and everything else sitting downstream of that has been the bottleneck is now under enormous strain. How do we make sure what they're doing is secure? How do we review all of this code, whether it's written by a person going 10 times faster or by an autonomous swarm of agents? Those are the problems people are figuring out, because once we can solve that is when you're actually going to start to see these velocity improvements across the board and start shipping and delivering value faster.
So when you see the security landscape, you guys, you really hanged your hat on that piece. As security comes into beyond the APIs, you got A2A, you got AP2, you have all these new mechanisms. Is there an architecture that you see developing, or an area that people should pay attention to that may not know to look there? What are some of the key areas that you're watching around how to maintain the security posture while accelerating kind of the innovation and the integration?
Yeah, the people that invested the most in prior years in developer velocity, developer productivity, golden paths to production, safe guardrails, kind of all of those terms that we've heard, are the ones that are benefiting the most from this, because those are the people set up to start increasing the velocity. The more code that's being written, the more security vulnerabilities you're going to have, the more stuff you're going to find downstream. The more of that you can shift left, the more of that you can put into the hands of developers as they become faster, the better those benefits you're going to see are. So it's really, nothing fancy, nothing new, just all those investments that people knew we should have been making this whole time. Now all of a sudden are paying off a lot quicker because everything is going faster to the left.
You guys were showing some stuff at your Assemble event. I know you got your March date set up for next year, March 2026. What was the key takeaway in the use cases from customers? Was it the cell healing, security modeling? That's my word, but you probably have a better word for it. But you guys were automating a lot of things. What's the trend? What are some of the patterns and use cases that emerged, and what's emerging now?
Yeah, our marketing team loved that term. I think you were the one that made it up. Yeah, so we've been trying to build the safe source for open source this whole time, right? We're trying to give people a trusted place to get all the open source their developers are going to build on from. Everybody knows, this, KubeCon knows this, but 90 to 98% of the code, by lines of code that you're writing, is open source. We might see that number come down a little bit now that people are writing 10 times as much code on the other end. But the vast majority of this stuff that people are bringing into their organizations is open source. That means it's not written by them. We've been known for our containers product. That's probably what we'll be talking about the majority of at KubeCon. But earlier this year, we announced more types of open source that we're doing that same thing for. So we announced our libraries product. That's that same thing, but for entire ecosystems of open source programming language libraries. Those things that people pull in on top of our containers or wherever they're writing code. Our Python libraries product, it's basically our own version of PyPI, where everything in there is trusted, built by us, and you don't have to worry about malware. We just went GA with that earlier this month. We've also included CVE backporting in that too. So these libraries, if you can't do an update for some reason on this timeline, we're backporting vulnerability fixes to the last three versions of the last 3 years worth of versions
Yeah.
for all of those libraries to make it even easier for developers to do updates.
You know, I, it's
Java
so,
and JavaScript and beta. Yeah, lots coming.
I mean, people think about like the importance of that. Can you share the operational benefit besides the blue screen of death you might have seen at Delta Airlines? Not to say that was an error on updates, but these are like hygiene issues, right? You guys are like doing the heavy lifting on all the corner cases. And you know, your developer-centric approach works, I get that, but like there's now a data-centric view. If you can't handle the volume of the data or the updates,
Yeah.
this is where AI could help. How do you explain that benefit operationally, and then dealing with just the velocity of change, whether it's inbound system changes or just data itself?
Yeah. Yeah, it's the way I think of it is like we're building a very stable, very rock solid foundation for you to do your development on. Um, if you're building things with hammers and screwdrivers, and now all of a sudden you give people power tools and machines, and they're going to start building a lot faster, those investments down at that foundational layer are even more important. And that's what a stable, safe, secure source for open source allows you to do. That's the foundation for all the infrastructure you're building.
You know, one of the things I was talking with someone on the AI side, they were talking about energy, and they were saying about with AI factories, and I want to get your thoughts on this because you guys have a similar situation. They said that the energy wasted on first order problems, like just changing stuff after you did things, like you're building a building, okay, let's break that down. There's a lot of build and tear down mechanics, whether it's a data center or an application. You guys really kind of made your way on this minimal rebuild concept. And again, this productivity gain. Can you share the challenges now with the how to build without tearing stuff down or making the right changes? What is available, and what's your just philosophy on that?
Yeah, I think with this velocity increase with agentic tooling, errors magnify the farther down the development pipeline you get. We've always known that. From Mythical Man Month, written back in the 70s and 80s. The cost of fixing something when it's in production is 10 to 100 times higher than fixing it while it's still in development. The role of the developer is changing. You're not really the one writing those for loops anymore. The more involved you are in watching the agent in the early stages, reviewing those plans that they're writing, critiquing those plans, making sure the research they do is accurate, that stops the errors from magnifying all the way down to that code that then is now churning because you're writing something and realizing you have to throw it away the next day. And so getting people comfortable with that, everyone is now a senior architect. And you're not really writing the code yourself. You're reviewing the work of your more junior team members. And those junior team members are very, very cheap now. So people can have teams of 10 or 20 of them. But it does mean you have to pay a lot more attention at those early stages to avoid having those huge rip and replaces later.
Yeah, it's great to have you on. You mentioned Mythical Man Month, kind of throwback, little triggering moment for me. But I get this question on. I want to get your thoughts on this since you're here, senior leader, ton of experience. The most common question I get from friends, relatives, people in the industry, mostly from either younger, just grad, computer science grads, and then older systems guys like me who are like, hey, I want to get back in the game. And you're seeing a lot of that, right? AI is just intoxicating innovation curve. I mean, like you said, you got superpowers. If you know architecture and system design, you can build anything. But the question I get is, what should I do? How do I get in the game? And with open source thriving, what's your advice for like where to jump in? How should people navigate the landscape of just either getting in the game of coding, building, innovating? Obviously open source, that's an easy answer, but once in, there's kind of like, what's the playbook? It's not, there's really kind of, it's being written. I mean, you can jump into like CNCF, but Linux Foundation has got a bunch of new projects popping out. So there's a ton of surface area to land. What's your take on that, and what's your advice for folks who might be like, I just don't know what to do. I got skills. Where do I go?
Yeah, your point is correct. The playbook is still being written right now. It's a fast-moving space. Everything is changing every day, every week, every month. If you're a company, get your team, get your developers familiar with all of the tools, because the ones we're using today probably aren't going to be the ones that are around in a quarter, a year from now. Get comfortable with change is probably the simplest answer to that.
Okay, great. Any plans for KubeCon? Teaser? Obviously, you got.
We've got a lot going on. It's going to be a busy week. Yeah, it's one of my favorite events every year.
Well, great to have you on theCUBE on our Cybersecurity Leaders program. And congratulations on the continued success and the financing vehicle. And hit that escape velocity. Keep it going. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for
Appreciate
having me on.
I'm John Furrier here in theCUBE for the Cyber Leaders Zero Trust environment. You're starting to see the security paradigm built in the AI era of infrastructure, platform, codifying with Kubernetes, cloud native, all kind of coming together. It's just distributed computing with software, and it's going to be scaling rapidly. Get involved, learn the tools. We're doing our best to bring that content to you. Thanks for watching.